Poverty, a winnable fight. It's not even worth it. I'm no longer the same. Nothing ever changes. I'm poor beyond blame. If I had $1, if I had your fame, at least you would hear me. You'd remember my name. Hi, I'm Clarissa Holland with Morton High School FCCLA. Poverty is a huge issue in our community and all around the world. In my community of Morton, Texas, the poverty rate is 24.38% and the average income is $54,000. Knowing these statistics, I use the FCCLA planning process to identify the concern of poverty and set the goal to address this issue by providing information and promoting chapter projects that will help combat this serious problem. The obvious side effects of growing up in poverty are nutritional deprivation, mental health issues, risk of academic failure, and the possibility of homelessness. This topic relates directly to Family and Consumer Science Education in FCCLA. Family and Consumer Science courses are developed around real and ongoing concerns of families and communities, and they include concepts for resolving these concerns through ethical action. The most difficult problems facing adolescents and adults are human problems of family, work, and community, which are addressed in my child development class and community service projects completed through my FCCLA chapter. Poverty can contribute to worsening nutrition by compromising the quality of food intake and bolstering hidden hunger, which is the deficiency of essential vitamins and minerals. Low income is associated with poor nutrition at all stages of life, from lower rates of breastfeeding to higher intakes of saturated fatty acids and lower intakes of antioxidant nutrients. These problems arise primarily because parents do not have enough money to spend on food, not because money is being spent unwisely. Policy options to improve the dietary health of poor children include giving more money to the parents by increasing income support, providing food stamps or vouchers, and using food budget standards to help inform the levels of income needed to purchase an adequate diet. We can try improving access to healthy and affordable diets by talking with retailers and local planners how best to provide food in an economical and sustainable way. Poverty leads to financial constraints that can in turn lead to the consumption of cheap, high-energy staple foods, primarily carbohydrates and fats, rather than nutritionally dense food. Through the consumption of carbohydrates and fats, energy levels spike, but the nutritional quality becomes compromised. We can knock out these issues by free breakfasts and lunches, snack packs for kids, brown meal bags, access to free food, and a community pantry. Not only does poverty affect nutrition, it can also have a huge impact on mental health. Poverty affects mental health through an array of mechanisms at multiple levels, including individuals, families, local communities, and even our nation. As it explains in mentalhealth.org, children and adults living in households in the lowest 20% income bracket are 2 to 3 times more likely to develop mental health problems than those in the highest. The mental health issue of depression can be a major risk of poverty. The WHO website states that evidence indicates that depression is 1.5 to 2 times more prevalent among the low-income groups of the population. Anxiety is a huge factor related to poverty. Research shows that mental illness reduces employment and therefore income, and that psychological letdown has caused anxiety to a big population of the low-income community. On a family level, poverty causes stressors such as insecurity in food, housing, income, and more. These stressors can also cause an increased risk of mental health problems like anxiety and substance abuse in parents, which can lead to child abuse and neglect, and in turn cause negative mental health impacts for the child. Low-income communities tend to have specific characterizations such as limited resources, poor houses, high crime and violence rates, and an inadequate school system, which are all associated with poor mental health outcomes. Mental disorders manifest in distinct ways for many people. However, the common underlying origin of post-traumatic stress syndrome remains a terrifying or traumatic event. Living in poverty often means surviving daily in vulnerable conditions, and with the financial instability that limits access to necessities such as food, shelter, and water. The inability to pay for expenses starts to become emotionally and mentally taxing. Poverty acts as a traumatic experience in many people's lives, and even after graduating in class status, difficulty persists to enjoy day-to-day life. Individuals with depression, anxiety, and PTSD are less likely to take care of their personal needs and more likely to have a dysfunctional family and be an inactive member of the community due to lack of resources. Poverty can defeat your academic success. Living in poverty disadvantages young children, reducing school readiness. Researchers followed over 46,000 children born between 2000 and 2009 to age 7 and found that children born into poverty had greater odds of not being ready for school than children not born into poverty. Prolonged stress during childhood can do damage to a child's brain architecture and can lead to lifelong problems in learning, behavior, and physical and mental health. During the first 5 years, a child's brain is at its most flexible, making this a critical period for learning and growth. Science tells us that children who face adversity in the first years of life, often related to living in poverty, are more at risk for experiencing negative effects from toxic stress. Poverty can attempt to fight your future. Studies show that children who grew up poor have a harder time escaping poverty as adults. For example, in one 2009 study by the National Center for Children in Poverty at Columbia University, researchers found that children who grew up poor were not only more likely to experience poverty as adults, but that the likelihood of being poor in adulthood went up with the number of years spent in poverty as a child. Grappling with poverty and mental illness can also increase the chances of experiencing homelessness. Poverty in childhood also has been linked to serious long-term economic consequences, including higher health expenditures, lower educational achievement, lost productivity, and lower earnings in adulthood, and increased risk of poverty later in life. I encourage you to take this information and take action to assist families and communities that are in need. Overcoming poverty is not a gesture of charity. It's an act of justice. It's the protection of a fundamental human right, the right to dignity and a decent life. Like slavery, poverty is not natural. It's man-made, and it can be overcome and eradicated by the action of human beings. Thank you.